Let's talk about a word that sounds kind of heavy, right? Philosophy. But I promise you, by the end of this, you'll see it's not some dusty, intimidating subject. It's actually something we all do every single day. So, let's get into it. All right, so let's just get right to it. What even is philosophy? It sounds so complicated, but the core idea behind it is actually surprisingly simple. And honestly, it's kind of beautiful. Let's break it down. The first clue's hiding in plain sight, right there in the word itself. It comes from two ancient Greek words, philos, which means love, and sophia, which means wisdom. So a philosopher isn't someone who has all the answers, they're just a lover of wisdom. It's about being in love with the search for answers. So if love of wisdom is where the word comes from, you could say that thinking about thinking is its modern job description. Philosophy gives us the tools not necessarily to find the final answer, but to ask way better, deeper questions. It helps us understand why we believe the things we believe. So how do we get a handle on all this? Well, it helps to see how philosophers organize everything. They basically break it down into four main branches. And I love this analogy. Think of them like operating systems for your brain, each one designed to tackle a different kind of problem. Let's do a real quick run-through. First up, you've got metaphysics. This one tackles the huge questions about reality itself, asking what is real? Stuff like, do we actually have free will? Next is epistemology, which is all about knowledge. It asks, how do we know what we know? Like, how can you be sure something is true? Third is ethics, which you've probably heard of. This is the big one about morality, asking, how should we act? It's how we figure out right from wrong. And finally, there's logic. This is the nuts and bolts. It asks, what makes an argument valid? It's the rules for thinking correctly. Together, these four pretty much cover all the big questions. Okay, so that's the basic framework. But philosophy isn't just some abstract theory you read in a book, right? It's a tool. It's about action. So let's look at how this stuff actually works in the real world. I'm going to show you two huge ideas that literally changed everything. And our first stop is with the OG of Western philosophy himself, Socrates. His entire method, his whole deal, was built on one incredibly simple but really powerful idea: humility. He believed that the very first step toward getting wise is to just admit to yourself, I actually don't know. So here's how his process works. It's pretty simple. Step one, you start with a common belief, something everybody just assumes is true, like justice is giving people what they deserve. Step two, you just start asking a series of simple, digging questions. You're not trying to prove anyone wrong, you're just exploring. The goal, in step three, is to see if you hit a solid foundation, or more often than not, you expose a hidden crack, a contradiction nobody ever noticed before. So what's the big takeaway from all this? It's that you have to question everything. And I mean everything, especially the things you are most certain about. The Socratic method is like the original computer code for debugging your own brain. It helps you find the bugs, the biases, the flawed logic in your own thinking. All right, now for our second big idea. This one comes from Socrates' star student Plato. And this one, quote right here, sets the stage for what might be one of the most powerful metaphors in all of history, the allegory of the cave. So Plato tells us to imagine this. There are people who have lived their entire lives chained up inside a cave, forced to stare at a blank wall. Behind them, there's a fire, and puppeteers are casting shadows onto the wall. For these prisoners, those flickering shadows, well, that's not just a show. That is their reality. It's all they've ever known. But then, one prisoner manages to break free. And this person, Plato says, is the philosopher. They turn away from the wall of shadows, away from the comfortable reality everyone else just accepts, and they begin the very difficult journey out of the cave. And what do they find when they get outside? The sun. In Plato's story, the sun represents the ultimate truth, real knowledge. And seeing it for the first time is blinding, it's painful, but it reveals that the shadows on the wall were just fuzzy, pale imitations of a much richer, more complex reality. The lesson here is profound. Plato is basically warning all of us that what we perceive with our senses, the reality we take for granted, might just be shadows on a wall. True understanding requires us to look beyond just what we see and question the very nature of reality itself. So we have a method for questioning our beliefs and a metaphor for seeking a deeper truth. But, okay, these are ancient ideas. Why does any of this matter to you, right here, right now? Well, it all comes back to this powerhouse quote from Socrates.
See, philosophy isn't just about abstract ideas floating around in space. It's about application. It's the tool we use to examine our own lives, our values, our goals, and our place in the world.
And this is why it's such a practical skill. It's not just for academics. It equips you to think more clearly, to spot a flawed argument from a mile away, to understand different perspectives, and ultimately to build a life that's intentional and authentic instead of one just lived on autopilot. So I'll leave you with a final thought, a little bit of homework, if you will. Using these tools we've talked about today, what is one belief you hold about yourself, about the world, about what's right or wrong, that you've just kind of accepted without ever really questioning it? Start there. That love of wisdom we talked about, it all begins with a single, honest question. Thanks for tuning in.